Oh, sugar. Should the government regulate sugar? Have you ever asked yourself why society regulates things? Why does society find it necessary to put such strict rules and regulations on things like gambling, drugs, alcohol, and smoking? Most people don't put too much thought into it. They just accept it as the fact that these things need to be regulated because they are quote-unquote bad. However, in reality, the main reason we seem to regulate things is because they have the potential to cause negative effects on society as a whole. For smoking, drugs, and alcohol, some of these negative effects include homelessness, severe health issues, and various mental health problems that arise as a result of addiction. Most people accept these regulations as necessary in an attempt to minimize these negative effects. However, when it is suggested that we regulate sugar for much the same reason, you are usually met with strong opposition. Simply put, people want to eat what they want to eat, and if you try to tell them what to eat, they're going to resist. The following presentation will discuss some popular arguments about regulating sugar, as well as discuss the health effects and ease of accessibility. It will then show that sugar should be regulated because it is addictive, harmful to people's health, and much too easily accessible, and continuing to provide recommendations on minor regulations society could implement to solve these things. Since there has been such strong opposition to the idea of regulating sugar, it has not gained significant traction. However, in 2012, various news articles published in Forbes and CNN discussing the issue revitalized the idea. One article was by Art Carden, who supported the idea that the government should regulate sugar, and supported his argument with statements made by the United Nations. First, though, I'll ask you, what do you view as the biggest threat to your health right now? I'm guessing many of you answered heart disease, obesity, diabetes, or something similar to that. And nowadays, that's a very accurate answer. However, in the not-too-distant past, many people would have been much more likely to answer something like the plague or some other similarly infectious disease. This is supported by the United Nations when they stated that, for the first time in human history, chronic, non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes pose a greater health burden worldwide than do infectious diseases. This is a very significant quote. The UN then went on to identify 3 major risks for contracting non-communicable diseases. The UN stated that the 3 major risks were tobacco, alcohol, and diet. When examining these, it is clear that the only one of these 3 that we do not regulate is diet. The harmful effects of sugar are further supported by Laura Schmidt of the University of California, who pointed to various studies that show that sugar does in fact increase the risk of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. She also pointed to studies that show it increases the risk of various other health problems such as hypertension in animals. Other articles and research on the topic has shown that a major reason for the popularity of high sugar foods is simply their ease of accessibility. A recent study found that eating healthy foods could cost up to $550 more per person per year. While this may not seem like a significant amount to some, it is extremely significant to many middle and low income families. This causes people to eat unhealthy food when they otherwise would not. This illustrates how the cost or ease of accessibility of sugar plays a role in its popularity. Knowing these facts, it is easy to understand the reasoning behind regulating sugar. I will now draw on these articles and studies to show that we should regulate sugar because it is addictive, unhealthy, and much too easily accessible. Firstly, a more specific reason we regulate things is because they are addictive. We as society understand the negative effects of addiction. It is clear that people who are suffering from addiction act irrationally, and we must do something to help them. Since studies show that people on sugar exhibit all the same symptoms as any other addict, it is only reasonable that we implement regulations on sugar just like we would any other highly addictive substance. Another major reason we regulate things is the potential negative health consequences many of them have. We regulate tobacco and alcohol in an attempt to minimize the known health effects. When comparing the health consequences of a diet high in sugar with the effects of tobacco and alcohol, they are very similar. All three increase the risk of things like heart disease and cancer. So if we accept the fact that these three things have much the same health consequences, if we regulate alcohol and tobacco in order to minimize the negative health effects, then we should also be regulating sugar for the same reasons. Lastly, a very significant reason why society regulates certain things is to limit their ease of accessibility. We regulate things like alcohol and gambling because society agrees that if certain things' accessibility is not regulated, then there would be much more severe effect on people and society as a whole. However, with sugar, the accessibility remains almost 100% unregulated. This causes sugar or high sugar foods to be much more accessible to the majority of people simply because they are less expensive. It is cheaper to sell high sugar processed food compared to nutritious natural food. In order to negate this, society must place reasonable regulations on the accessibility of sugar and high sugar foods. So, knowing all these things, how should we proceed? Well, we should definitely not criminalize sugar or regulate it too severely. The best course of action would be to place sugar content limits on certain items to make sure that the sugar is not too excessive, while also implementing minor taxes on high sugar foods in order to balance the price between them and more nutritious foods. If society implemented even these minor regulations, they would see the negative effects associated with sugar drastically decrease. In the end, regulating sugar is a controversial issue that society should discuss and research further. It is clear from our regulation of alcohol and tobacco that we regulate many things without much opposition. We do this because we want to minimize the issues associated with these things. However, regulating sugar still draws severe opposition. But now that you understand what people think about the issue, the negative effects of sugar, and its accessibility, it should be clear that we should implement some regulations in order to limit sugar's addictiveness, health consequences, and ease of accessibility. Thank you very much.